Popful Mail is such a quirky title, you never would have expected it to come to the US.
This is Pixelated Audio, episode 44.
Alright, Happy New Year and welcome back to the bi-weekly video game music and retro gaming podcast, Pixelated Audio. I'm Brian and this is James.
Hey, today we're going to be listening to music from Popful Mail and talking about its release over several different platforms. The track that brought us in was the title theme from the PC Engine CD, arranged by the Human Entertainment staff.
It's pretty cool. Just when you think, like, you look at the title of this episode, you think, oh, Popful Mail, I know all this music. Brian, James, I played this game. And you hear this track starting off, you're like, wait a minute.
Yeah, what is this?
Yeah.
Where did this come in?
Yeah, so this is just a really cool track. It's a really cool arranged version. I think it has a lot of energy, and it was a fun one to come in with. So
yeah, I think this track is super fun. It really reminded me of like a golf song. Like I thought it could have fit into like a golf game. Like I was thinking like Mario Golf, and I just imagine in my head like you're kind of like flying over the courses like while this music's playing.
Yeah.
This game is really fun and silly, so I could really see this fitting in.
Yeah, I know. Like, it's funny because when I first heard this track, I was like, "Oh my god, this is like Wave Race title screen."
Yeah.
You know, they could just swap those out and nobody would know.
Yeah.
But no, it's a rad track, and it was something like, well, you know, this is all kind of live Red Book, but let's go ahead and throw it in there. Even though we're going to be listening to a lot of chip-based music today, start off with something arranged, something fresh, kind of maybe change what you thought you knew coming into the episode, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. This is a very important game to me. I remember getting Popful Mail. It came out, and I hadn't heard about it, actually. This wasn't something I read in magazines. But I had a friend who was really, really into Lunar, and so was I. And he was like, well, have you heard of Popful Mail? And I was like, well, what's that? And he's like, oh, it came out like a few months ago. You know, you should check it out. It's made by, it's done by the same company, published by the same company, but he was like made by the same company. And so I picked it up, and this was a used copy, and it was, it had been out only for like half a year maybe. And I got it for like $20. And
nice.
So, and now it's, well over.
Super expensive. I think like copies like $100.
Yeah. But, this game was really significant for me. So, one of my all-time favorite Sega CD games of all time. I mean, aside from Lunar, of course, which it's my favorite anyway. But yeah, I didn't pick it up when it launched, but it is a very important game, significant to my childhood, and it's a lot of fun, a lot of cool pop culture stuff, and we'll get into that in a little bit.
Yeah, and like the running theme for this show, this is not a game I played or even knew about as a kid. So, so my first experience playing this was probably maybe like a year or so ago when Brian brought it to my attention. Yeah. So I really enjoyed getting the chance to dive into this one.
Well, that's the dynamic, see, because you're really big into retro gaming, except a lot of these you're experiencing for the first time. Yeah. So it's kind of a cool thing to see how your take on it. That's why I'm always curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I get to experience it as an adult where I can kind of maybe appreciate it a little bit more.
Right. And so some of my nostalgia kind of seeps in, and I'm like, oh man, this game was so good. And then you can be the one that's like, you know what, Brian,
I didn't really like it. No, but this game I really did like a lot.
Anyways, let's get into it. So the official title is Popful Mail Magical Fantasy Adventure, and it's a 2D platformer sprinkled with different RPG elements that was originally developed for the PC88 in 1991 and the PC88 in 1992, which are essentially the same game. but then it was ported over to the PC Engine CD in 1994 by NEC Home Electronics and the Sega CD by a joint effort between Sega and Falcom.
And also in 1994, Falcom remade Popful Mail by itself without Sega for the Super Famicom. So that pretty much covers the Japanese releases.
Right.
Now for North America, we got the Sega CD release with Working Designs doing the translations and publishing the game in 1995.
And this wasn't a direct translation either. There's tons of pop culture references and stuff thrown in as well.
Right.
The PC88 version and the 98 version and the PC Engine CD versions are all pretty identical, but the Super Famicom and the Sega CD versions are all really different from the originals.
Yeah, and actually those two games are really different from each other as well.
Right. So we're going to be focusing a little heavier today on the Sega CD port, since this is how I first played it, and this is how you played as well, right?
Right.
And we've got the music from all the games, though. So if you're like, hey, like I was saying earlier, if you're like Brian James, I've heard this soundtrack, I know it real well, that's great because you're going to get to hear a lot of stuff from different systems.
Yeah, and if you've never heard of this game, then there's going to be so much good stuff for you to listen to.
Right, we got a lot of good stuff. Let's go ahead and get into our first track. This is the opening theme from the Sega CD version of Popful Mail.
That was the Sega CD opening theme composed by the Falcom sound team JDK, which we're going to get into a little bit more. But,
right.
I mean, what a track. That was pretty
Yeehaw.
fun. Yeah, that was really silly. I thought it kind of had like a children's TV show startup theme. Like they're running around and like, hey guys, let's play. And be silly. And which I think for this game, for the Sega CD version that I played was really fun and really silly. And
really bright colors
yeah.
right on the screen. Yeah. It was a cool track. It's really, and that banjo is just, I don't know. It's so funny and so silly to me.
Yeah.
When I was listening to this, I was like, really, should we put this one in there? Oh yeah. It's just too cheesy and too fun to leave out. But yeah, it was a good one.
Anyway, let's get into some company info because there's a lot of companies that were involved in making this great title come to all these different systems. So
right.
First up, we have Nihon Falcom, which is a Japanese company founded in 1981 by Masayuki Kato. And Falcom was actually credited as a major key player in the growth of the Japanese personal computer software industry.
Right.
And Falcom was one of the three biggest RPG companies in Japan alongside Square and Enix.
It's weird to think that back then, all these companies, we see all these companies now that are like huge players in creating these top tier titles, mostly Western now, but back then there were really just three main companies doing like these RPGs and these experiences that people were in love with, and that was Squaresoft, Enix, and Falcom. And it's weird because Falcom we don't hear about them as often as frequently now.
Over here, you would assume that it would have been Square and Enix, and Falcom would have been like the one trailing behind, but really they were the ones that actually influenced a lot of the industry.
Exactly.
I know you, Brian, are actually really interested in the company for their E series, but they're actually responsible for other games like Legends of Heroes, Dragon Slayers, and the Xanadu spin-offs, and also the Brandish series.
They've done stuff across all sorts of different systems. I was kind of looking at their bio and like what they've developed on. And there's the PC88, the 98, the Sharp MZ2200, the X1 and the X68000, the FM Towns, Apple IIGS, MSX, PC Engine CD, Super Famicom, Windows, every Sony handheld and console ever, pretty much. And I mean, they were just all over the place. They had just tapping into every kind of market that they could to kind of find what would maybe excel or what would be the new trend and the new fad. They even did stuff on like Cassette Vision and even the N-Gage. Yeah,
I mean, when you got over 30 years of experience and they're still going strong, I mean, these games are coming out like crazy. And I mean, that's amazing. All these systems they've had in their lifespan as a company, and they've just pretty much came out on all of them.
Yeah, if you have the resources, I mean, why not tap into anything? Because, back then they didn't know if the X1 was going to take off, or the Apple IIGS, or the FM Towns. They didn't know, and so it was like, well, if we put our software on there and really showcase it, maybe this will be the number one selling title of this platform. So might as well tap into those markets. But it's a really interesting company. We're going to kind of get into them probably as the show progresses, not just this episode, but because there's so many different titles that we want to cover down the road, that Falcom is just an important one to us anyway, and a really important player to video game or retro gaming history.
Yeah, and a major player on the publishing side for us is Working Designs. They were actually an American game publisher based in Redding, California, that specialized in localizing Japanese RPGs, strategy games, and top-down shooters for American audiences.
Right.
They published a bunch of cult hits, but are probably best known for their work on the Lunar series, Albert Odyssey, Silhouette Mirage, Shining Wisdom, Raystorm, and Vi.
And I pretty much had all those games.
Yeah.
I was a Working Designs nut. I couldn't help it. Anything they put out, I was like, oh, I got to get it. Got to get it. Yeah, but the cool thing about Working Designs that was so awesome in the 90s is that they were one of those few companies that really wanted to take down the cultural divide between Japan and North America.
Yeah, I mean, they brought a bunch of really cool titles that we weren't getting here, and they just kind of brought them here, localized them, and said, let's see if American audiences like them or not.
Yeah, let's see if these guys, let's see if they bite, and if they like it, awesome, we have a hit. If not, well, then whatever. All we're doing is localizing it and publishing it.
Yeah, I mean, we saw a bunch of big series that we would have never seen here had they not brought them for us to get excited about.
I never would have played Popful Mail. Anyways, I was totally in love with their translations for Lunar, but I gained a new respect for all the quirky titles that they released, like Magic Knight Ray Earth. That was one of them. That was for the Saturn, actually, specifically. But I think it first came out on the Super Famicom. It was a totally cool game. You play as these... did you ever play it?
No, I actually didn't play that one, I don't think.
Okay, well, you got to try it out. So you play as these three young girls who have this like whole Sailor Moon kind of thing going on. It just does not sound as cool as I thought.
Yeah.
Like, I could have probably taken it a different direction, made it sound cooler.
Yeah,
but anyways,
I'm going to go play it now.
But no, it's a really cool game. Like, you pick between these three different magicians, or magic knights as they're called, and you can switch through them like on the fly, kind of like three dirty dwarves in a sense. But it's got an RPG kind of action adventure thing to it. It's a really cool game. Beautiful graphics.
Sounds cool.
Really cool little story. It is kind of got that cutesy Sailor Moon thing, but at the same time, it's a fun game.
It sounds pretty cool. I would definitely would try it out. Another really cool thing about Working Designs was they were actually one of the first companies to utilize the CD-ROM format for recording full English voice casts in their games, which, can't really stress enough that voice acting wasn't even a big thing in video games, especially bringing weird Japanese games to the US and then getting full voice casts to do them.
Exactly. So there's a lot of games that would have like samples thrown in, like X-Men, but it was like a short thing, or maybe it was like a sentence and it was like this really low quality. But now they can use CD and they can record everything at, CD quality level and be able to play it that way. And we can experience like a full dialogue, like a full animation. And that was a really cool thing that they were doing. They really cared about their box art. They really cared about the whole presentation as a whole. Like, so if you get like when I got Lunar for Sega CD, it came with a full color manual, like the box.
I've seen some of those boxes you have. They're like beautiful boxes with tons of stuff just jammed in there that are just great for fans. Right.
And like the cover itself, the box art itself is like a foil stamping. Beautiful designs. They really paid attention. When they went to the PlayStation, when they did the Lunar Silver Star Story Complete series and the Eternal Blue for PlayStation, those remakes, they included like a pendant and like a full like leather bound book, and it was crazy. Like, they'd put so much detail, and there was also the soundtracks included, which is really awesome because that wasn't being done a lot either. The thing about Working Designs, I think their translations made them really stand out, and there's a lot of people that liked their translations. Like, I loved them. I thought it was great because they took a ton of pop culture. We'll get into some quotes in a few, but they put a ton of pop culture into their games. So it wasn't like a direct translation, and there was people that were upset about that. They were like, this isn't really, this wasn't translated correctly. Like, there's a lot of stuff thrown in here that wasn't in the Japanese version. But I think what they were doing is they saw this game as, or these games as, maybe not necessarily speaking to the American audience. So being able to kind of throw in a little bit of extra things here and there. Now, the story, everything is the same, but like there's extra jargon and stuff thrown in to make it more, comical or...
and I think that with Working Designs, they were taking a big risk. They were bringing games that, most companies thought the American audience wouldn't be interested in. So bringing them over, and if you do a direct translation, people, they may not be that interested in Japanese culture, so they would kind of get turned off, or maybe the sales would be kind of but if you make the game a little bit more tailored to what American people are used to, or maybe some of the ideas that American people are used to, then they might really dig into these games and start bringing more over.
Right. Like for me in Popful Mail, there's like certain quotes that I was just dying laughing as a kid. And even now, like I replayed it through for this, when we're going to record the show, I'll go back to and replay through it. That I'm still laughing about, and I'm still like finding like this is so funny, like this is so dumb, but they were going for that. And that there's also a lot of like sexual innuendo and stuff.
This game has a lot in there, I think.
So it's really cool what they were doing. You can agree with it, you can say if you're really pure about the Japanese version, don't play this version, but I thought it was great, and it really fit me, being a kid in the 90s. It fit perfectly. Anyways, Working Designs in 2005 closed their doors. Sadly, but they also weren't really putting out a lot of stuff anymore. And the CEO of the time, which was Victor Ireland, he opened up a new company just soon after that called Gaijin Works.
Yeah, I think it was just that very next year.
Right. They were still doing the same kind of thing. It was the same kind of idea, bringing Japanese titles over to the North American audience. They did Arc the Lad games. I'm pretty sure I think that's about it. They maybe have a few more in there, but you don't really hear too much about them nowadays.
Yeah, and I mean, really, with the way the gaming culture has developed over the years, I'm still surprised that there are so many games that get published in Japan that never make it out of Japan. I mean, we get a small fraction of them. I mean, until recently, we weren't even really getting like Fire Emblem, and those, like with the 3DS Fire Emblem Awakening, really exploded. So now we're starting to get more. But I mean, that's an amazing series that there's so many games that have never come here. And
but to get these translated is really cool.
Yeah.
And it's so this story actually. So I'm gonna go ahead and tell it. I was thinking I'll just not mention this at all, but the translator for Popful Mail, and she also did a few different things. I'm gonna leave names out of this, but no, it's funny because I didn't know at the time, but I dated her daughter for a while.
Yeah.
So it was funny because she was kind of a psycho. But anyways, no, it was a really interesting thing when I found out, and I was talking to her mom, and she's like, "Oh yeah, I did the translations for like a few games you probably don't know." And I was like, "Well, try me." She knew I was into games. I was like, "Try me." And she's like, "Well, there was like she did Arc the Lad, so she did some stuff for Gaijin Works as well, but there's a few weird titles in there." And she said like Popful Mail, and I was like, "What?"
Yeah.
And this is like already, I think, they had closed their doors and everything.
So she had switched over.
Yeah, so she hadn't done it in a long time, but it was kind of interesting.
Yeah, no, it's a small world, I guess.
Yeah, it's weird. Anyways, we're going to get into some more music. We have 2 more tracks from the Sega CD version. This is the first kind of level of the game. Yeah. This is the jungle, the exploration music, and then the battle music.
That was Jungle Exploration and Jungle Battle, composed by the Falcom Sound Team JDK for the Sega CD.
I love both those tracks, and you hear those so many times because I've started this game a million times thinking, oh, I'm going to replay it. And it wasn't until doing this episode I managed to replay it through it again. But I love this. I love this track. Both these songs are rad.
Yeah, I mean, you spend a lot of time in the game hearing this, so the Jungle Exploration track, you spend a lot of time hearing that song over and over and over, but to me, it never got old.
Right.
It was very fun. I thought this track carried on that fun feeling that the theme had, but it wasn't quite as silly. And I think this track really shows that something silly is not bad and like it has to be stupid. It was fun. It had little hints of being soaring and stuff like that.
Right.
And, kind of hinting at the heroic nature of this game. Yeah. But I mean, this is a game that doesn't take itself overly seriously, which we'll get into the story. But I mean, as you're seeing that there's this theme of just fun and kind of silliness.
See, this is the exploration. That first track is a track that I personally didn't hear a whole lot because I always wanted to get right into the levels, and this isn't a level track. It's only on the main theme, on the main map. So it's kind of when you're organizing your gear, checking your stats and stuff like that. I didn't really spend a lot of time there, so I only heard this the first maybe 15 seconds before moving to the next area. But if you were kind of more careful and kind of strategize it a little bit more, and you wanted to go through your menus and see what you had, then you would hear this track in its entirety. But I sadly didn't really hear it too often unless I just had the game. I walked away to get lunch or something when I was a kid. But.
Yeah, well, and for me, like I was playing this specifically for the episode, so anytime I heard any music, I would want to just kind of sit and listen, and it was really neat seeing like the maps and seeing what could be coming up and stuff like that. So I like to spend time on the menus and all that stuff when I'm playing a game for the episode. But if I'm playing it just for fun, then I probably would have just blasted through that.
Yeah, the battle music, that next track, this I think is the most iconic for this game, because this is the one that you're going to go back to and hear as a first kind of run every single time you play. In fact, if you guys are listening to this episode, you haven't played this game, and you go start it up, this is the first track that you're gonna notice right off the bat.
Yeah, the first level. And
it's a really cool track, and then when you get like halfway through, it has those those hits, and they just kind of go into this new breakdown.
That's like my favorite part. As soon as it gets to that new breakdown, I love that part so much.
Yeah, it's cool.
And you're seeing that this part is actually a little less silly and a little bit more soaring and kind of heroic, and I thought that was so cool.
I think this defines Falcom Sound Team JDK for me, because they have really strong electric bass and electric guitar, and then they also have these very heavy like lead synths, and that just really screams Falcom Sound Team to me. And I think this track is a really good example of what this team produces. And they're really working with two different pieces of hardware here. There's the Sega CD PCM, which is responsible mostly for the drum, so that's why you get that really strong, like heavy, percussion section. But you get all the synth and all the melodies and stuff through the Sega Genesis, the YM2612. So it's a really cool blend of PCM and FM synth together. And I think that's really cool. Now, they didn't use the PSG at all that I noticed in this game, but games like Sonic and stuff that really heavily use that PSG, they didn't have to now because they had so much more that they could do with the PCM and the Sega CD.
Yeah, and I think that since this track was such an iconic track, I think this would probably be a good chance or a good time to show like maybe what some of the other soundtracks sound like on other systems, since these two chips together probably made a very unique sound for this game specifically. So I think
we're going to be playing music from all the systems.
Yeah, and I think if we just played maybe a few seconds to kind of show what the different systems sound like for this song, I think that might be kind of a cool comparison.
That sounds good. So that first track was The Jungle. Do you want to play that one again? You want to just
I think we'll do The Jungle.
So let's play The Jungle track. This is from the Sega CD. Let's move over to what do you got? PC88?
Yeah.
Okay.
Still very cool, but you can definitely hear the difference.
Right. It's still rad, yeah. All right, so let's play the one from the Super Famicom. Sounds like a Mario Kart track.
Yeah, kind of islandy.
Yeah.
Those trumpets. Once again, very different, but still very cool.
Yeah, it's got that really obvious Super NES sound font. So the last on the list is the
PC Engine CD.
PC Engine CD. Yeah, let's listen to that. And this isn't even fair because this is pure, Redbook. But it's cool to see that spin on it, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that'll give you kind of like an idea of the difference between the systems. They're all, it's all the same track. It's the same composers and everything, but to hear it through like the different hardware and, other spins on it, like with that Redbook from the PC Engine CD, it's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's neat to see that this game shares some differences story-wise and, all that stuff, but even sound, there's a very different range of sounds that this game can produce or that people might have experienced.
Right. So let's get into our next track. This is Cave, and this is the battle music from the Sega CD version.
You just heard the Cave battle music composed by the Falcom Sound Team JDK for the Sega CD.
That bass, dude, is so good.
Yeah.
That is like, I when I heard this track for the first time, even as a kid, my eyes were just wide open. I was like, what is going on? This is so cool.
Well, I think with this track coming up directly after that little, sound sample that we did and really explaining how the chips work for this game for the Sega CD, I think you can really appreciate the difference between the, like the bass and drum sounds and then the synth sounds all together. Like you kind of understand it a little bit more, so it makes the track seem even cooler.
Yeah.
And I've just really liked it. I mean, I've just loved the synth sounds in this. And
we're huge fans. We're both huge fans of FM synth.
Yeah.
Genesis music is just, that's like our, I guess, our soul food. It's it's something we listen to. We listen to a lot of Genesis music together, and so I think this is a good, anytime Falcom Sound Team is working on anything on the Genesis, it's going to sound unbelievable. And this is one of those, it's like a short track. It's like a minute long, but they're putting so much in there, so much energy. And, I didn't want, this track to end. I, listened to it once and we had to listen to it again because we're just like, oh man, let's listen to that.
Well, and for me, this was the part in the game where I got kind of stuck in like
and frustrated.
Yeah. So I listened to this track a lot, which was great. But, I mean, it's just a really great track. It's not silly. Like they're starting to kind of move away from the silliness of it. It's still fun. It's not like overly serious or dark, but it does have a little bit more of a, I guess, a little bit of a darker undertone, or it kind of makes you feel like a cave type setting, I guess.
Right. Well, in this point in the game too, you're a little bit further on. You've actually started your quest. It's not just like this. And we'll get into the story in a sec, but it's not like you're just kind of starting out figuring out the game, the controls and everything. You're actually kind of already established like where you're headed and what you want to do next, and so this is kind of like we're kind of deeper into the story meaning now, and so we're going to get a little more intense, a little more, I guess, crazy with what we're going to do instead of being kind of like a silly thing like you were saying too.
Yeah, so we said that this music has been done by the Falcom Sound Team JDK, and earlier we said we'd get into a little more detail about who the members are and who the kind of the big composers are for this game specifically. So I think now would be a good chance to go into a little bit more on the composers.
Right. So there's a few responsible. So Falcom Sound Team is a really big group of people, but specifically for this game, the ones that were actually, kind of in charge of working on the sound for this game, there's Mieko Ishikawa, Atsushi Shirakawa, Hirofumi Matsuoka, Takahiro Tsunashima, and Masaru Nakajima, and Naoki Kaneda. But Mieko Ishikawa is one of the most influential on the Popful Mail soundtrack and one of my personal favorites for the Falcom Sound Team and, as a whole. And it's cool because a lot of her time there was working alongside Yuzo Koshiro.
Which is amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. So she officially joined Falcom in 1987, doing nearly all the early Ys games, namely 1 through 5. She did Xanadu, Revival Xanadu, Dragon Slayer 4, and The Legend of Xanadu 1 and 2. She's also done The Legend of Heroes 1 through 4, Brandish 1 and 2, Sorcerian for the PC88 and DOS. And there's also a few more contributions she's done for other Falcom games, throughout her years there. Just, like maybe a track here and there.
Yeah.
But she retired from the company's sound team in 1997, and now she's working as one of the directors for the company in general. So she's not really doing sound anymore. She's actually in charge of major decisions that the company's making. That's really weird career choice.
Well, I think you build up, and they you see that they have more hats that they're wearing, and they have other skills outside of doing music, and maybe can kind of keep the music going really well, almost like a director of music, as well as maybe some ideas about the company and moving things forward.
Yeah, well, maybe it was just that doing the music for the Falcom Sound Team was too stressful. Who knows?
Yeah, well, we've seen programmers turn into heads of companies and presidents and stuff like that. I mean, so that's kind of odd. But anyway, another one of the big players was Atsushi Shirakawa, also known as Tenmon. He worked at Falcom, contributing to a lot of the same games as Ishikawa. And in 2002, he kind of dropped out of game music and started scoring anime soundtracks for animes like She and Her Cat, Voices of a Distant Star, F, A Tale of Memories, and a few more. Now, though, he's really just doing original music, and he has a bunch of albums out, so we'll have to put some links in the show notes to some of his stuff.
I haven't listened to any of his stuff. I saw the stuff on his website, and he's got a few different albums. I guess it's okay. But
yeah, I would assume that they're probably pretty good. I mean,
Mieko Ishikawa and Atsushi Shirakawa are pretty much the main composers for this game, and all the others are contributing. They may have a track here and there, but those are like the key contributors of this soundtrack. So wanted to make sure we mentioned them, and give them a little bit of a spotlight there.
Yeah. So actually, let's move on to our next block of music. We have the Volcanic Zone Exploration and Volcanic Zone Battle music. So we're going to play those, and we'll be right back after the break.
That was Volcanic Zone Exploration and Volcanic Zone Battle for the Sega CD, composed by the Falcom Sound Team JDK.
Listening to the soundtrack out of context from this when we were getting ready for the episode, these two songs were two that really stood out to me. I really liked, especially the Exploration one.
Why is that?
It just had that very that 90s kind of montage.
Don't you
synthy.
say Terminator.
Yeah. I haven't said Terminator in a while. It does remind me a little bit of Terminator, and and I love that. I love that sound. Like it's that's like my thing. If I can compare it to Terminator, the music, then it just makes me happy. So that track was really great. It was a very kind of melancholy, like heroic kind of sound.
Yeah.
And just those really synthy sounds with that galloping beat. I just loved it a lot.
I think the bass is like, it has a syncopated rhythm or something, so it has that. They do that a lot. A lot of Falcom games have that syncopated bass, and I think that is another characteristic, another trait of the sound that they produce. If you look at some of their released albums, you still hear that a lot. Even the live guys will be playing that. It's really cool. I think it's a cool track. Battle. Now, for me, this is my favorite track out of these two, because this track itself, it's really interesting because a lot of Falcom music will go into these really, really high leads, but this stays in the mid-range the whole way through and never really gets those high-pitched tones. So for me, it just felt more of like a midway kind of, and it is kind of a midway track, a midway level. But I like this track a lot. I think it was really, really rad in that sense. Yeah,
I definitely noticed that it kind of stays more in the middle range. It starts to get a little bit more soaring towards the end, and then there's that breakdown at the end that is just so great before that loop. Yeah, I was like, whoa, that really, to me, hits home that this is like more of a battle, type music compared to the more kind of exploration type stuff. So,
well, we haven't talked about the story at all yet. We haven't talked anything about this game really, other than just some of the music we played so far. So let's get into the story a little bit.
Yeah, so I mean, the story is really interesting. The way that they present the story too, it's a very charming game, and it kind of really makes it stand out. So
very quirky and odd right in the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, so it starts out and you get this cutscene, and I mean, this cutscene itself is going to just show how weird this game is. So you start out and you see this bounty hunter, and her name's Popful Male, and she's chasing a criminal, and his name's Nuts Cracker. So, and he's like this really weird, like Italian guy that like he has all these little dolls that are kind of on his side, and you see Popful Male like destroy them all, and he's just so weird. And you were doing like his voice earlier.
Yeah, he's like, what does he say? He's like, you want to see a funny joke? Bomba!
Yeah,
and like his head explodes on her. And
yeah, so because like she has him kind of cornered, and she thinks that she's caught him, and then he cuts off his own head, and then his body runs off.
Yeah.
So it's like, what's going on? And his head's still talking, but like, so basically, because she doesn't have his full body, she can't collect the bounty on him. So she decides, well, all right, I'm going to take the head into town and see if I can at least get something for it.
Get something for her efforts.
Yeah. So because she's like wanting to kind of get rich, so she wants to at least make a little bit of something off this guy.
She's a bounty hunter. That's her whole thing. She's going out and trying to find these people, and she's this sassy tomboy, redheaded little elf, big pointy ears. And, even in serious times when things are, get really intense, she's thinking to herself, she's like, I wonder what the payout's going to be on this.
Yeah, she's a funny character, and it really shows in these little animated cutscenes, like I said. And when funny things happen, like the eyes get really bulgy, and it's really expressive. And so anyways, so she has Nutcracker's head, and she decides, well, I'm going to take it in and see if I can get a little, a few bucks out of it. So she heads into town and she takes it to a shop, and when
it's like a bounty shop or something, like a rewards collecting or something.
So when she gets inside, there's like this massive pile of these heads, and the guy's like, I already got a bunch of these over here, and she's like, no, I'm not here for that. Like,
and she kind of kicks it aside.
Yeah, she covers it pretty good, and she's like, I'm here for like the best bounties around. Like, I only take the best. And he's like, well, you're in luck. There's a new one for 2 million gold for this rogue magician that used to be a good guy, and he goes by the name of Muttonhead. And she's like, well, then that's for me. And then she goes outside
to check on the bounty board,
to take her ticket or whatever, tag or whatever, and she sees everyone kind of crowded around, and And it's really funny that there's like this crappy little Sonic drawing like posted up on the board. So I thought that was really funny when I first saw that.
Working Designs didn't do the art for the game, but I'm sure the original programming team, like Falcom team, did want to put in some little minor references and stuff, and they worked alongside Sega to do the Sega CD port, so maybe they thought like, hey, let's just sneak this in there. I wonder if in any of the other versions, if there's something else there.
Yeah, something that based around the other companies, but it was just fun, and after she gets her ticket, she's just like, yes, like I'm gonna be rich,
and she does the whole fist in the air jump and like freeze frame, like 80s gum commercial.
Yeah, it was super fun.
Yeah, it was fun.
And then Mail kind of goes out on the search for Muttonhead, and that's how you start your adventure, and you meet other people and stuff like that.
No, there's a lot more to the plot, and that's kind of like the intro to get you set up and kind of get you to know the characters and Popful Mail and stuff like that. But the game's plot itself revolves around Kazir, Nekros, and Olger, and these are ghosts from the past that once nearly destroyed Popful Mail's world. Now, the Black Seal is about to be broken, and they don't really explain what the Black Seal is in the beginning of the game. You don't learn about it until later on. But when they break that, they can once again return to this world and wreak havoc again. Yeah,
and you can see with the music, it's kind of started out as kind of silly and odd and funny, and then it kind of progresses into something a little bit more soaring and epic. And so the story is like that too, but like we were talking before off air, that this is not like to say that there's not funny parts in the more serious sections of the game.
Right.
I mean, this game is just littered with pop culture references, like we talked about, and just funny, quirky, odd things.
Yeah,
and
comedic situations between some of the characters.
Yeah, and it's really funny to see like Mail as like, she's just kind of like this little money-hungry, sassy lady that will leave someone in a prison because they're not willing to pay her. And it's just funny to see a main character, a hero that's like that.
Okay, so we've talked about Mail a little bit already, but there's a bunch of other characters. In fact, you can play as 3 different characters in this game. And so Mail is the first one. She's the bounty hunter, and she's the fastest one. She uses a sword, and she can run around pretty quick. But then you can also switch between her, and you meet a person named Tat later on. And Tat is a magician who was the former apprentice of Muttonhead.
Yeah, and it's funny because Tat is like, he's a little bit more shy, and you can see that he probably gets made fun of. He's kind of a do-gooder. Like, even Muttonhead calls him
super polite.
Yeah, like even Muttonhead says that he's kind of like, a brown noser. Like, he's just wants to be like the best.
He's the guy that you ladies want to bring home to meet mom and dad.
Yeah.
No, so Tat's a really cool guy. He's a magician, and he has like a wand that he uses, different kind of rods, and he can, cast magic and stuff at enemies. He's kind of mid-range. He's not super fast, not super slow. He has a nice attack. But what's nice about him is that projectile weapon. Yeah. And he's really useful in that sense. Plus, later on, you can also control the directions of his shots. And that's very, very useful and needed.
Well, and I think one thing that's interesting to think about just from these 2 characters is that a lot of times you'll see a male, like a male person, not male as in her name, male, but a male person as a lead in a game, and then a lot of times you'll see like a female as more of the magician,
like the
sorceress,
secondary role,
the non physical type characters. So I thought it was really funny that the roles were reversed in this, where a female is the main character, and there's a male magician that's kind of like the sorcerer, like shooting the projectiles and stuff.
Right. So the third character is Ga, and Ga's kind of a creature in his own. He's this little blue kind of like,
I think kind of purpley, isn't he?
Maybe purpley, like kind of like fat. He's like a huge fat bat.
Yeah.
And he can jump really, really high. He's super slow, but he also has a projectile weapon. And when you upgrade their weapons later on, they get, different things. Like he has this one that is like a stream of fire. It's like a flamethrower. It's really, really effective. But no, Ga's great. And every time he says something, he's like, I don't want to go in there. Gah.
Yeah. Well, in that sense, he's a little bit like Kirby or like a Pokemon, where like Ga is like all of the creatures, that's their name. That none of them have different names, like how all the Pikachus are Pikachus. That's their name is Pikachu. Right. But for him, like you meet this whole town of Ga's, and they explain to you as soon as you get there that we're all named Ga, and so it's kind of interesting that he's not really unique compared to the rest of the group of his race, but he's kind of out on this adventure with you.
Ga's a great character. I love him in the game, and he's fun to play with. In fact, I think at the end when you battle like the main guys at the end, Ga is one of the ones you have to play as. So you have to really get good on how you use him. Even though he's slow, his attacks are very, very powerful, and he's really effective.
Yeah, and for this playthrough for the episode, I didn't get far enough. I got to where I met Ga, and I met the town of Ga's, but I only got to play as Male and Tat, which I really enjoyed playing as Tat. I liked him a lot, especially because of the projectile feature. But
Right.
I didn't get to try out Gaw.
Yeah, it's too bad because Gaw's a great character, but
Yeah.
you're gonna get there.
Yeah, I'll go back. It was just running out of time, and the nature of this game was kind of frustrating with a time limit. So I wanted to just kind of take a break from it and say I'm going to beat this at some other point.
Right. So we've talked about let's see, the Nutscracker. We've talked about Muttonhead a little bit. So there's Slick. He's an interesting character because he's not a playable character, but he's kind of a key character, even though you kind of are trained to hate him. Mm-hmm. He's a total idiot. The first instance you meet him is when you're in the jungle, that first level, and he's stuck in a tree, and he's like, hey, help me! I'm monsters were chasing me, and I have a pocket knife, but they still scared me up in this tree. Could you help me out? And Male, you're playing as Male, and she's like why would I help you? You're just going to be a pain. And he's like, well, come on, could I follow you on your adventures? And she says to him, she's like, so you want to pay me to make a man out of you? Yeah. Interesting. That's pretty funny. I was cracking up.
I mean, that just shows you some of the interactions. But you like him. I mean, I thought he was very funny. I
hated him. I was like, oh my God. But see, like, I went kind of hand in hand with Male because she was annoyed by him the whole time. She was just like, I'm going to leave you for dead any chance I can. I can't stand you. But he keeps showing up.
Yeah, maybe because I was playing as Tat a lot more. Tat is much more understanding. So in those cutscenes, it would have Tat talking to Slick, and he was like, oh, okay, I'll help you. And maybe if I was playing more as Popful, I would be a little more irritated. I would take on her personality.
So there's also a lot of other bad guys and stuff involved. And there's some minor characters like Glug. He plays a little bit bigger role. He's like a dwarf, but it's funny because he's a dwarf that can create mithril items, but he doesn't have a beard. And so Popful Male, she goes up and she's like, so what's with the no beard kind of thing? I thought you guys had a whole look going on. And he's like, that's kind of out of style now. We're trying to do this. When the older generation's ways of thinking dies out, I think this will be the new trend for dwarves. And so that's one of those funny moments.
Yeah, it's just so clever. And I mean, because dwarves, pretty much every game, a dwarf has to have a big like Santa gnome kind of beard. And,
right.
And to see one that doesn't, and then them call out like that he doesn't have a beard. Let's point out why he doesn't have a beard. And I think stuff like that's funny. So this game had a lot of just great humor, really weird things going on, and a lot of just make you laugh out loud. Actually,
right? A lot of pop culture references. Again, there's one character that I got to play a clip from this. It's one of the enemies that you meet way later on in the game, but this clip is so classic. You want to hear it real quick?
Yeah,
it's pretty cool.
I found you. You're mine, you living puddle of baby fat.
Oh my! Who are you?
I'm your worst nightmare, your scariest dream, your sexiest enemy, and the master of all I survey. Cower in fear before my fearsome manliness.
Get real. Do you think I'm going to fall for your steroid-induced threats? Forget it, muscles.
Listen to me now and fear me pretty soon. I am no kindergarten cop. The sissy man Fernancio could not teach you a lesson, so I have come to terminate you. I am the predator and you are my prey. This little skirmish will be your last action, hero person. It's Judgment Day.
I'm beginning to get the picture now. You're the geek that's been sending out all the monsters after us, including Venancio and all these weird golems.
Oh, the little infant has a brain. How impressive. You are such a smart baby with the skinny arms. When did you graduate from potty school? Let me tell you something, punky chops.
What?
I am Sventi Uncommon. Remember that before I crush your brain like a tiny, juicy raisin.
So if you listen to the clip and you heard his name is Sventi Uncommon, oh man, what a awesome character. He's like my favorite villain in like any game just about. He is so hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, you can just see like how silly the translation is. You notice there's tons of pop culture references to probably like 5 or 6 different Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, Kindergarten Cop, Terminator, Judgment Day.
Yeah, there's a ton in there.
So much. And it's just so funny that like you didn't have to read this. You got to hear it, and with the voice acting, and you got to see these little animated squares that showed like their faces, and it was just so cool.
Really cool about the animated squares too. Like you can see their mouths moving, and it's really neat because it's not just like random movements. They're actually using waveforms like analysis to detect when to speak, so that it works for the English, North American audience and the Japanese as well. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome, because I did notice that it didn't seem like really far off. Like you do see a lot of things that are already animated and they come to the US that the mouths don't match up really at all.
Right.
But I just thought it was so cool to see you could just kind of sit back, and it wasn't like a full screen cutscene. It was just like these little squares that had her face and his face, and you could see them, like their facial expressions, and it had the funny little things where like their eyes would get big, or like they would have those like weird mouths and stuff, and it's just really expressive and really got you sucked into this world that was so different at that time to hear all these voices.
So I know you haven't gotten to this part yet, but I wanted you to hear that because it just gives you another example of what like this game has. All the villains, all the heroes, they all kind of come together with this really amazing, hilarious cast of misfits pretty much. Anyways, let's get into our next music. We've gone on a little bit here. So we're going to play a track from Iceberg, the exploration track, and we're also going to play Battle.
You just heard Iceberg Exploration and Iceberg Battle, composed by the Falcom Sound Team JDK for the Sega CD.
That's a really cool track because it has that Michael Jackson kind of pop feel to it.
Yeah, I thought that first track, the Exploration one, had a almost Sonic-like sound. I thought it was very slowed down, but if you maybe sped it up, it might have felt a little more Sonic-like.
I can see that.
But I thought it had a lot of really cool sounds. It had really cool subtle stereo stuff going on, like little twinkles in one ear,
right?
And then
little
the
flourishes,
other.
right?
Yeah, there was a lot of little flourishes in this track.
So I really like the exploration track, but the battle, the in-game stage music, exploration or the battle music, I didn't care for that much. I didn't really like this track that much.
It was a little different. It was the beat was galloping really hard,
right.
And then the synthy sounds on top. The melody was really slow. I thought it was a little bit too much of a difference between the two, and it didn't really ever seem to really get as fast paced as you would expect for the actual level.
Yeah, and I think part of it too is because this level in itself puts a kind of a sour note in your mouth. It's not that I despise ice levels, because I don't. They're fine. They have their place. But this track itself, and the stage itself, in Popful Mail, you slide around so much on the ice. It's almost ridiculous. In fact, you're given items to help you avoid that, but you slide around so much. There's so much momentum when you just barely move that it gets really, really frustrating doing the platforming. And I think that this music playing when I'm already frustrated kind of put me in a bad mood, and hearing it, it's just not really that amazing of a track. But we want to let you guys be the decision makers and see if you guys like it too. So
yeah, I mean, I didn't get to this part in the game, so I could see that really heavy galloping beat would be kind of almost stress inducing, with trying to be really subtle. And because I did notice
really
that throughout
graceful,
the game that when I was trying to just do a little jump forward, mail or tat would just jump really far, and I would end up and I would end up jumping on top of enemies when I meant to just jump barely in front of them, and so I could see then with the ice physics making it really difficult.
But anyways, we have another track to play. This is the battle from the castle music, so let's listen to that and we'll return in a sec. That was Castle Battle from the Sega CD, composed by the Falcom Sound team.
Earlier, I had said with the Iceberg Exploration that it had a very Sonic kind of esque sound.
Right.
And I don't know if it's just because this title is called Castle, but I almost had the hint of a Castlevania type sound to the very beginning of this song.
Right. It's a lot more sinister for sure. I love this track.
Yeah, no, I really like this track a lot too.
Absolutely love it. And this is a point way later on in the game. This is toward the end that it really starts getting difficult, and that the end is coming up soon, so
it just starts getting difficult. I thought this game was pretty hard to begin with.
Yeah, but it really ramps up towards the end, and this part in the game is already the whole plot, the whole story, what your task is, and it's kind of the leading up to the final showdown. This track for me just kind of sparks all these really, I don't know, just really energizes me. It's cool.
Well, I like that it has those really drawn out heavy notes that I thought was very kind of more of that sad synth heroic sound from one of the tracks that we played earlier, and I think that's just really cool. I think I haven't gotten to that point, so I'm still kind of in the more silly feel of the game, so to get to that point, it's just a really neat transition to me to see that it starts out as very silly kids show kind of sounding, and then it gets to this very heavy, dark, kind of sinister, heroic sound.
Yeah, and this part of the game too is just, I think as a kid I was so jazzed to be able to get this far, because it is pretty difficult, and when I know that the light at the end of the tunnel is in sight, it kind of even makes me get more excited, I guess. And this track too, it's kind of weird. The lead is kind of atmospheric in a sense, and it's not really, it doesn't have any really strong melody, but I just love this track. It's really a really, really excellent track. It's very well composed, and I think it had a lot of thought put into it.
Yeah, and one of the things I also liked was the very kind of twinkly sounds that were going on. And then as the song really gets into full form, you can still hear that twinkly sound in the background And I thought that was really cool. There was like a really subtle thing that was carried out through the whole track, which I really liked. We didn't really see a lot of. We got a little bit of that in the Iceberg track with the very subtle things going on in the background, but I thought this actually felt a little bit more like a fully formed like section that was carried on throughout the background.
See, I could have used a little bit more length in this track. I think they could have really built on something a little more intense and energetic. I think that, it's a very short track and it loops when you're playing, but if it could maybe, I don't know, come in with some really strong like lead guitar or something, maybe just for, a few bars and then go back out into that kind of more slow, menacing feel. I think that would be really cool as well. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I could have definitely used a part where it kind of ramps up, because there's that section where it slows down again, which is kind of the opposite of what a lot of these tracks in this game do. And I was kind of expecting it to kind of get more intense, but it got slower. So I think if it kind of peaked and got more intense and then kind of came back down, or maybe it went slow again and then peaked, and then there's the loop where it gets slow and then peaks again.
Right.
I think that would have been really cool. But
cool balance.
This track has just such a great sound to it.
Yeah, I think that might be a good segue to get into the gameplay, because this game, I think what makes it so attractive to me to replay it is that the fact that the gameplay is so fun.
Yeah.
So you start out, you have a few different basic things that you can do. You can jump, attack, open doors, chests, and speak to other NPCs, scattered throughout the world. And you also have a menu screen that you can use to change your characters. They're, different stats, their attributes. You can get different weapons at shops and different armor at different shops, and you can switch between those based on the situation. So some certain weapons work a lot better. Even though you're further in the game, you might want to use like the earlier weapons for certain sections, and that being able to switch like anywhere during the gameplay is kind of a really cool thing to be able to do. It stops everything, so you can kind of take a breather, pick what you want, and get back into it.
Yeah, so that really kind of lends itself to that RPG element. And there, I mean, like you said, there's a lot of times where you have to switch your weapons. I remember there was a boss that was like the wood golem, and it was very good to use your sword against him, because you could kind of almost stun lock him.
Right.
And then he breaks apart, and then his head starts bouncing around, and you switch over to like Mail's daggers, and you can kind of hit them and kind of follow them, and then you just kind of keep going through that cycle until you kill them. Whereas if you just had to use the sword or just used the daggers, it would have been very difficult.
Yeah, that wood golem was tough.
Very tough.
Very tough. And, there's enemies later on in the game that aren't nearly, like, you could easily, psych them out and kill them without even moving half the time. That guy was really, really hard.
Yeah.
Anyways, you also have health and attack bars, and you have like 100 points. And as it goes down, you slowly get to 0 and you die. There's not really much to it there, but you also have an attack gauge, or like a power gauge for your weapon. So if you're playing as Gaw and you have this fire breath attack, it only has so much before you run out and you have to wait for it to recharge. So they wanted you to really be tactical about how you went about killing enemies and think things through.
Yeah, because like I was saying in that battle with the wood golem, your sword is just kind of unlimited. You just keep going and keep going.
Right.
But using those daggers, each time you throw the dagger, that meter goes down, and if you kind of sit there and don't do anything, it'll start to recharge, but you start to run out and you run low, and then when you get to the next part where the head's bouncing around, you start out with almost nothing, because when you switch weapons, it stays at that level that you switched it from. So if you had nothing left and you switched it, you start out with nothing. You have to wait for it to recharge.
And that's the same for all the characters too. So if you're playing as Male and your health is at 50% and you switch to Tat, your health is 100%. They all have independent health gauges, but their weapon gauge is all shared. So if you run out of weapons with Tat and you switch to Gaw, your weapons are still going to be 0, and you have to wait for them to recharge. So I think that putting that into account also is kind of a major element to this game.
Yeah, and I did like the idea of switching characters at any time, switching weapons at any time. You can also save at any time, which is really nice.
It's very, very convenient for this game.
So the game basically had save states built into it, because this is a very difficult game.
Yeah, you could save pretty much anywhere, unless it was a boss battle. You could save anywhere in gameplay before like a cutscene or something. You could save, and it would save it to the Sega CD's memory. And to be able to do that was really important, because when we talked about Power Quest in our last episode, that was one of the big detractors that kept me and you from wanting to go back and play the story mode.
Yeah, and another thing in this game that you had to kind of keep track of is the different items. You get, some items that were just like keys to unlock doors, stuff like that. You had mentioned some of them help you with, the environment, like not slipping on the snow.
Oh yeah, the shoes, the snowshoes, or the
Yeah.
spike shoes, or something like that. There's also stone shoes that you can walk across like spikes and stuff.
Oh yeah.
But all these items, you know, that you get in your inventory and you find at shops and kind of along the way. There's not really any, you know, other thing other than weapons you really need to worry about. But money is very critical because you need to be able to buy this stuff.
Yeah, and so every time you kill someone, you get, you know, a couple bucks here and there, and sometimes some enemies will give you a little bit more. So as you progress through the game, you'll start to get a little bit more per enemy that you've beaten. So for me, I got lost a lot, so I didn't really have too much trouble with money because I was just constantly having to fight everything.
Right.
But I mean, you use that to also buy, you know, health replenishes because you don't find too many throughout the game. You find like chests here and there.
Right.
And you get like apples and bananas, and
they're pretty scarce. Yeah.
Yeah, and each one of those kind of gives you a different amount of health. Like I know that I saw that the bananas, I think it was like almost like full health, but then like an apple is like 80%, and like you try some cherries and it's like gives you like 20 extra hit points or something like that. So it's neat. So you got to carry your inventory so you can check your weapons and you can change your armor and stuff like that, but you can also, you know, access your health power-ups and stuff like that.
Right.
So
anyways, let's get into one of our last tracks for Sega CD. This is VGM 18, and this track, see, we're getting all these names, these track titles from the actual OST that was released by Falcom, but this track wasn't on the OST, so it doesn't have a title, so it's just VGM 18. So let's listen to that and we'll be right back.
you just heard BGM 18, composed by the Falcom sound team JDK for the Sega CD.
It's a really heroic track.
Yeah, no,
Cool.
to me, it didn't quite feel like credits music, but it felt like maybe you just beat like a big boss or something like that. So, I mean, do you know where it falls in the game?
I feel like I know like several places that it played, and I'm like imagining it in my head, and they're like after cutscenes and stuff, but I can't pinpoint where this played, because I know it's not the final ending song, because we're gonna play that later, but it's I'm not.
It has that feel though, like not quite like credits music, but almost like you just did something really hard and you survived it or something.
Yeah, I'd love to be a composer that's all I work on is credits music.
Yeah,
everything's heroic, everything's awesome.
Yeah.
No, it's a cool track though. It's really like I said, heroic, and you feel like you've accomplished something, some kind of sense of fulfillment, like something big has been completed. I really want to say this is like some major midway point or something, but it was a cool track.
Yeah, I really liked it a lot.
So let's take a break from the Sega CD version and move over to the music from the Super Famicom version, because like you and I, we didn't experience the music in this game, and it wasn't until, like ripping the soundtrack and being able to listen to it to kind of put the pieces together and hear it. It's really cool. And the thing about it too is that there's a lot of tracks that aren't in the Sega CD version, like new kind of additions that they made for this version of the game. And so all the tracks that we're going to play today from the Super Famicom version are really unique to the Super Famicom. So let's listen to our first track. This is called White Clouds in a Blue Sky. You just heard White Clouds in a Blue Sky for the Super Famicom version of Popful Mail, composed by the Falcom Sound Team JDK.
Yeah, this is very different sounding.
Very different.
Yeah, and it's really fun. So I guess I would assume it's kind of towards the beginning of the game.
Right.
One thing that I thought was kind of funny was that the beat had a very kind of Casio keyboard kind of sound to it. But the melody and stuff like that on top of it was really cool. I thought that the guitar sample was a little odd, but it was cool. It was unexpected. I liked it.
It's a very odd track. I'm not sure if I like it.
Yeah.
We wanted to put this in because this doesn't appear in any other version, and it doesn't really sound like Popful Mail that we know.
Yeah, I think the funness of it, maybe it kind of had a lot of odd parts compared to some of the songs we've already listened to.
Yeah, but you hear that like kind of symphonic, I want to say like ballad in the middle.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of whimsical, almost like a dance.
Yeah, what's that all about? That was, I don't know. It was a weird track, and I don't know where this plays in the game. I did try the game out, and it's kind of, I don't know. It looks really, really pretty. Yeah. It doesn't play nearly as well as the Sega CD version. But the music in this, for whatever reason, Falcom decided they wanted to completely re-record or rearrange a lot of the tracks. And so what they did was they kind of independently just re-recorded all new music for the Super Famicom version and kind of released it in its own package. Even though it's very similar, there's a lot of the same rearrangements of Sega CD tracks. This soundtrack itself kind of stands out, and there's weird different parts. Yeah, so anyways, we do have some more music though.
Yeah, so let's move on to the next Super Famicom track, which is called Destiny, and we'll be right back. You just heard Destiny, composed by the Falcom Sound Team JDK for the Super Famicom version of Popful Mail.
Holy moly.
Yeah, that was, I was listening to it and I was writing notes, and then there was a part that just comes in, and I just looked up at you and our eyes met, and I was like, whoa. That was
fantastic track.
Yeah.
That was so cool.
Very cool.
I loved it. No, it's funny because the first part reminds me of like X-Files meets Halloween. It's kind of got that soundtrack, and then it just kicks in with like the whole like electric band. It's, I don't know, just total powerhouse. What a great track.
Yeah, so when I was writing my notes, I wrote down long notes. I really liked that kind of in the beginning. And then there was the unexpected kind of bells and chimes kind of coming in. And I thought, oh, this feels very sinister. And the next thing I wrote was, wow. So that's, and then love it. So, and then it's just, it
very
felt
descriptive.
Yeah, it felt very almost like, like murderous and kind of like horror genre for a little bit of it, which I think was like kind of like Halloween feel that you were mentioning. I think this could have been thrown into like a game that's very violent, like a Castlevania or something, and would fit right in.
Yeah, this track itself really feels like it's like a live performance. It feels like, these guys up on stage. And, Falcom Sound Team, they did a ton of live shows in Japan, all throughout Japan. And I could just picture like them all on stage just rocking out to this. It would be like the perfect J-rock kind of concert to go to. I'd love to see that.
Yeah, me too.
That'd be so rad. We do have another track from the Super Famicom version. This is called Marching Down Tomorrow Road.
You just heard Marching Down Tomorrow Road, composed by the Falcom Sound Team JDK for the Super Famicom version of Popful Mail.
Another totally kick-ass track.
Yeah.
So awesome.
It's almost face-melting.
Yeah, no, they're just wailing. I think my favorite part, too, is not the lead. It's the rhythm guitar. And he just goes into those like crazy like vibratos and bends and hammering. It's just wild. Like, I don't even know how you sequence that kind of stuff. And it's all samples and just... That's a lot of work, a lot of effort, a lot of thought put in.
Yeah, I mean, and like you said, these are tracks that didn't even show up in any other version of the game.
Right.
So.
It's funny too because these tracks are actually my favorite in the whole Super Famicom version of the soundtrack because the other tracks, maybe I just know the Sega CD version too well, and it just that something just sounds off. But these kind of independent, these kind of special tracks that didn't appear in the other ones. I really stand out to me is really cool. Now, that first track, The White Clouds, I could skip that one. But these two last ones, man.
Yeah, and I think that is the case, that you're so used to these other these Sega CD versions of the songs that these feel less like just less interesting, or they just sound, like you said, sound a little bit off.
Right.
Whereas those three tracks were just totally different and you never heard before, and they weren't in the Sega CD version, so they just felt fresh and fun.
I know what you mean, but let's talk about the graphics a little bit. There's one thing we haven't really focused on yet, and this game's graphics are actually pretty amazing. I think they're excellent. They look beautiful, especially on the Sega CD. That's how I played it. That's how I remember it. Yeah. And you're getting Genesis hardware graphics and cutting that in with some cutscenes and some FMV. It's really cool.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think the Sega CD version, that's the one that I'm most familiar with. It feels kind of like we just showed with the music. It feels like the version and the other ones feel a little odd or off.
Even though it first came out on the PC88.
Yeah, I mean, because the PC Engine or the PC Engine CD version it's very kind of bright and it feels more blocky. And it like whereas the
sprites are a lot smaller.
Yeah, whereas like the Sega CD version has more blending and more kind of roundness to some of the things.
Right.
It's a little bit of a darker feel. It's not so bright and colorful. So it feels...
That could be the color palette between the Genesis and the PC Engine as well.
Yeah, a lot of Genesis games kind of tended to choose that darker color palette, whereas other ones, we saw that with the Nintendo and stuff like that, it was a lot more bright color palettes, Super Nintendo especially.
But the backgrounds are beautiful in the Sega CD.
Mm-hmm.
I really like it. If you look at the first level, the jungle, you can see like a lot of different, changing focus and stuff in the back.
Yeah, a lot of layers.
Yeah, a lot of different layers. And it just feels like a jungle. It feels like you're in these tree houses in this, really kind of rich environment. It's kind of rad.
Yeah, and one thing I did notice that I really liked a lot for the Sega CD version compared to some of the other ones is the way that they had the menu across the bottom or like the stats. Whereas the PC Engine CD kind of divided it. You had stuff at the top and bottom.
Right.
And whereas the Sega CD put everything at the bottom, and it was a little bit less information, but I think it was all the information you really needed.
Whereas I think that might just be a limitation of the hardware on the other platforms because, you look at the PC88 version, for example, and everything is, I think all the sprites, they could only put so many on the screen at once to, to accommodate for everybody's different hardware on the system, that they really had to kind of utilize where the action area takes place, where that focus is. Whereas the Sega CD and the Genesis hardware, the whole screen could use all the colors they want, all the sprites. There was less limitations maybe there.
Yeah, and one thing I liked about the Sega CD menu is they reused some of the space. So they didn't have all the information that you would need in that little menu. Like in the gold area, that's kind of like okay, I know how much gold I have. It's not really necessary to know all the time. So when you would attack someone, that section would switch to the enemy's health. So you didn't have to have enemy health on the screen the whole time. Kind of like the PC Engine CD one kind of had a space dedicated to just enemy health, which was kind of nice. So you could kind of keep an eye, look down at the different menus and see like, okay, I'm hitting him, and I have a few different things.
Because I don't need to know how much gold I have when I'm attacking a boss. All I care about is his health and how I can get that to drop to 0.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it's really important. Now, I do want to say that the Super Famicom version is actually really pretty. It's a really pretty game. Yeah. It reminds me a lot of Lost Vikings or other platformers that were on the Super Nintendo, Super Famicom. It's very rich colors, very vibrant. The towns look a lot more alive than the Sega CD version, but it was just the controls and mechanics that just threw me off.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I think that the Super Famicom looks really, really beautiful. It has great variety of textures. It has a great color palette. And it has a lot darker feel compared to some of the other games, not quite as dark as the Sega CD version, but it does look really beautiful. And one thing that I want to mention before we move past the PC88 is that it had this really cool like bezel around it. So even though, like you had said, that it kind of had to shrink the screen, it had really big menus, but it had this really cool. It almost looks like angels,
like a fresco, right?
Yeah, so it looks really cool, and it's very limited color. But you kind of look at it, and it looks like, wow, this is like you would see it, in like some Venice or something like that, like some great beautiful work of art that's sitting there,
kind of covering. And I think that's a characteristic of Falcom's games. They really like to incorporate a lot of artwork and a lot of beauty around, kind of flourish the graphics even as you're playing the game. Like the Super Famicom version, the PC88 and the PC Engine CD, even though those aren't I wouldn't say they're the preferable way to play, they still look gorgeous. They still look like a really, they definitely fit with the hardware, and Falcom did a really good job at really kind of designing each game to work the way it did, and all the other companies that they did the ports of the other games as well.
Yeah, so we talked about the Sega CD version and the Super Famicom version and played some music from those. So let's jump over to the PC88 and PC98 version with a track called Volcanic Zone/Iceberg.
You just heard Volcanic Zone / Iceberg for the PC88 98 version of Popful Mail.
Wow. I really didn't expect that. It was a lot more atmospheric than I expected.
Very different. I think this is between the levels, kind of like as you're transitioning.
Oh, okay.
It was something I hadn't heard on the other versions, so I was like, oh, maybe we should put this in. And you're like, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, no, it's very, very different, like you said, and it kind of made me feel like the sun was coming up and we're just like watching it or something.
Yeah.
I mean, it was neat and it had some
very mellow.
Yeah, it had a little bit to it, but it was a very simple track. Especially
coming from those Super Famicom versions.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little bit more toned down. Now, the thing about the PC88 and 98 hardware is, it's all kind of like standard, system stuff, but it's interesting because the old PC88s were only, and even 98s were only beeper sound, so there was no actual audio, it was just beeper. And later on, NEC shipped an FM synthesizer soundboard on, like later on, that would find itself in a lot of like new units. Like they were adding it in, and it was interesting because it added 3 FM channels and 3 SSG channels, and it became standard for the program. So all the software that was coming out, they were like, oh, let's make use of this OPN, sound hardware. But even later on after that, they said, hey, let's enhance, go on top of that and then create another sound generator with PCM that had 6 FM channels and 5 rhythm channels, but also include the 3 SSG channels as well as CD, CD quality audio PCM sound. So they added so much extra on top of that and created OPNA, which is the new standard. So all the new games and stuff coming out were using either OPN or they were enhancing it using OPNA. And this game actually makes use of both of those. There's an OPN version and an OPA version. And so we're playing, the one we just played was the OPNA version. And so it kind of gives you, there's a lot of richness, I think, going on.
Oh, yeah.
Even though this is not the best track to kind of, describe or showcase, the PC88 and 98 hardware. I think you can still hear that there is a lot of rich parts and subtleties going on in this track.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things that kind of surprised me was the atmospheric ability that it could have. And I just think it's kind of funny with you explaining that, how they went from pretty much no sound to like, oh, let's get some pretty cool sound, and then let's kick it up a notch and really get some amazing sound.
And we see that with the like DOS. A lot of old DOS computers, IBM machines were beeper only, and then they added Sound Blaster and they added different Roland and a bunch of different things. So it's just as hardware progressed, they decided to add more replacements for the current sound stuff that they were using, and this gave the developers a lot more freedom and a lot more rich sounds that they could do. The PC88 98 lasted for years. Very popular computer system in Japan. We do have another track though, and this is a really cool track. This is the ending 2 from the PC88 and 98 version of Popful Mail.
That was Ending 2, composed by Falcom Sound Team JDK for the PC88 and 98 version of Popful Mail using OPNA sound hardware.
It's a mouthful, but no, it's a cool track. You know, like it's hard to judge because this isn't something that we that bouncy, fun, happy stuff that we hear in the Sega CD version or even the Super Famicom version. But this is the ending track, so it does have a little bit more of a toned down feel to it. It's a little bit more mellow. It doesn't have the, it's not peppy, I guess.
Yeah, you can see that. It kind of feels like almost sad, like that it's ending. It had some really interesting synth sounds. I think they chose some weird sounds. It almost made it feel like they wanted it to stand out more, like instead of using a sound that was similar that they probably could have approximated.
Yeah, like they used some new unheard of instrument or something.
Yeah, it was like some weird like blippy things, but I don't think that was bad. I thought it was a very interesting track. I thought it had some cool parts to it. It had a nice melody. I had some call and answer that I thought was really neat. So I thought all in all it was a good track.
Yeah, it was
not
cool
the
track.
best from today, but it was really interesting.
Right, and it is an ending track, so we got to be fair with it there. And there are a lot of voices too. If you listen closely, it is a little bit slower, a little bit doesn't kick it up like the other ones, but there are a lot of little tiny voices if you pay attention, and I think that's what makes it stand out, and that's why I'm glad we added this track in.
Yeah.
This game in general, I think, was received pretty well.
Yeah.
I absolutely love it, but also I'm coming from a person who played it growing up, so I bring that with me. What do you think about it?
Well, I mean, I really loved it. I am very excited to spend the time with it, to go through it. Like I had mentioned before, trying to beat it before we recorded, with the kind of like needing to wander around and get lost a lot. It was kind of getting a little frustrating, and that was tainting the way that I was feeling about the game. And I don't mind that in games where you get lost and you don't know what to do. So and I didn't want to kind of walk away with a bad taste in my mouth just because of the limited time that I had to play it. So I decided to just stop where I was at and I'm going to pick it up at another time. And because I really fell in love with this game.
It's charming.
Yeah.
It's a charming game.
The characters were really different and unique. I thought the interaction with the characters was something really amazing that was going to keep me excited to play this game. And then the music on top of it was just really, really good. Yeah. I would like to try out some of these other versions. I have access to play some of them, so I do want to try them out. But I don't think that we're alone in the love for this game, because just if you see like how much of a cult classic this has become.
Yeah, it's a huge cult hit. I mean, people, it goes for what, 100 something?
Yeah, I think like
eBay?
a Sega CD copy is not cheap.
I'm still glad I have my copy.
Yeah,
sitting all perfect and pretty in a box.
Yeah. Well, it'll be a nice day when I get one in my collection. It won't be anytime soon.
Right. I think when the game came out though, it wasn't really received that highly. It's like a C+, B-. Like people weren't overly in love with it. But I think it was the people that really appreciated it coming to the US to begin with that I think fell in love with it, and the ones that remember it being such a quirky title and the humor in it, because this game, from the outside, it doesn't really show it doesn't really seem like it's offering a whole lot, but when you really get invested and you form these bonds with the characters and see how goofy and ridiculous some of the dialogue is, it makes you love the game and remember. Like I remember a lot of these quotes, a lot of these lines in this game, because it hit me. It hit home when I was that age.
Yeah. Well, there's definitely some good quotes from this game, and I can see that some people would just be like, "Oh, this is so cheap." Like there may be some people that listen to that clip that we played of that bad guy and just be like, "Oh my god, like turn it off. I can't listen. This is so cheesy." But I think for a lot of people, they found all these little references and stuff like that really refreshing, and then just to see characters treated in a different way, and it's very different from a lot of American games, so it really stood out, I think. And I think a lot of games that reach that cult status, they don't start out doing very well. Like they're not like instant hits right off the bat. Like you wouldn't see them in those PlayStation Game of the Year or whatever. It would just be like it would kind of grow over time. It'd be a little bit more of a sleeper hit. People would tell people about it, and they try it out, and then lo and behold, it's a game that everyone's talking about.
Right. Definitely pick it up though, if you can, or if you have means to play it.
Yeah.
Like I'm not saying go spend $100 on a copy on eBay, but if you have a means to play it, definitely give it a shot.
Yeah.
It's way worth it. But let's move over to the PC Engine CD port. And we saved this one for last, not because it's any better than any of the other stuff, but it's a little bit more displaced. And it's comprised mostly of Redbook audio. It's like 90%.
Yeah, so the PC Engine CD version was ported over by Hunex, which was basically a partnership between NEC and Human Entertainment. And with that, they had their own sound team completely redo and rearrange all the music. So we're going to play a few tracks from the PC Engine CD version. First up, we have Volcanic Zone, which we already played, but this is such a different sound.
It's totally different, yeah.
Yeah, we wanted to get into it again. And then coupled with that, we have BGM 11.
That was Volcanic Zone and BGM 11 for the PC Engine CD version of Popful Mail, arranged by the Human Entertainment staff.
Those are pretty cool. There were definitely some things that I really liked about these tracks, but there's also some things that I'm not quite as happy with.
Yeah, I don't think that the Human Entertainment audio team is I guess they don't have the chops that the Falcom Sound team JDK does, but it was still a cool arrangement. I think that it still had, a lot of energy behind it, and there was a lot of cool instruments thrown in. And this, granted, this is all Redbook audio. It's all, there's obviously synthesizers and other digital audio mixed into these live, these live instruments. But overall, I think it was a cool track. And yeah.
Well, I think for me, it wasn't so much the arrangement or the notes or anything like that. It was more the samples. Everything felt kind of muted. Almost like it wasn't recorded with like a good enough microphone or in like a well soundproofed room or something
well,
like that.
that's the quality of audio too that they had to squeak in, right? So like this, so the Sega CD version, you think that that's all Redbook. A lot of people think that it's all Redbook audio, Sega CD. Well, it's not true.
Right.
It's only certain instruments that are actually in CDDA, and so like being able to, or PCM. But they did have a limitation of what they can do and what the engine, the PC engine, could process. So
because I also missed a lot of the really heavy, like bassy sounds that some of the other games had in their music. So everything kind of felt like it was almost like you were listening to it through like a closed door, and you weren't quite getting that everything from it. Whereas the second track I thought sounded a little bit better, but I still missed a lot of that heavy sound to some of it that I think would have complemented some of the high like trumpets and stuff a little better. Yeah,
so when we were saying like Hunix, redid the all the audio for this game and rearranged all the stuff. There's actually a few key composers that were part of the sound team for Human, and that's why they ended up doing the soundtrack. So there is Koji Nikura, Hiroyuki Naka, Shiko Sugawara, Hideto Maeda, and on the electric guitar, Chiyomaru Shikura, and on the electric bass, Masahiro Yonezawa, who also did some of the arrangements for some of the tracks in the game as well. But they were the the main instruments that were doing like the bass and the electric guitar. So the really interesting thing about these guys is that all these guys have done various audio work, composing and engineering. They're not just composers; they do really hard programming and engineering as well. And I think 4 of them have their own audio production studios now. Like, so they're still doing stuff, and they have their own separate, kind of separate from Human and stuff now, but they have their own studios. So like Chiyomaru Shikura is the executive director of an audio company called 5PB. And I was like, okay, well, I don't know much about them, but they've done a ton of different things. And, the company as a whole has done a ton of different things. And, they're still active in doing stuff today, and I think that's really cool that these old, school composers are still keeping up with it, even though they may not be doing necessarily game stuff. Maybe they're doing, like you were saying earlier about the composer doing anime soundtracks or movie soundtracks. I mean, as long as they're keeping up with it, I think that's still pretty rad.
Well, and I think with a lot of composers that were doing a lot more work for like Redbook audio, it has much more application outside of games. So it's much easier to make a living doing that, I'm sure, than being a chiptune composer that type of instrument doesn't exist outside of games.
Right.
So anything you do is either just for games or you're doing something completely, totally different. So you don't get to use your game notoriety to help out your other part of your career as well.
There's some composers who are very comfortable in the game bubble, and they can really write great chip tunes when they're making their own instruments and drivers and stuff like that. But then you put them with a real instrument, and they're just like, I can't do this. I know a few composers, friends that said the exact same thing. They're just like, I can't play instruments for the life of me. I can't even play piano. So no, it's interesting. But we do have 2 more tracks to play. We have BGM 13 and 14 from the PC Engine CD version of Popful Mail. That was BGM 13 and 14 for the PC Engine CD of Popful Mail, arranged by the Human Entertainment staff composed of Koji Nikura, Hiroyuki Naka, Shiko Sugawara, Hideto Maeda, and on the electric guitar, Chiyomaru Shikura, and on the electric bass, Masahiro Yonezawa.
I think that these were much better examples of some really, really good Red Book audio. I think
very much redeemed themselves because the first two tracks I just wasn't feeling. You were in the same boat. This kicked it up a notch.
Yeah, I think
really
that
rad.
it had much more full sound. I got like that heavier bassy feel, and so I think it helped out with the higher notes. And I just think that it was a really, really cool track. Now it didn't feel very Popful Mail to me.
Not at all. I was thinking to myself like, oh yeah, we're still talking about Popful Mail.
Yeah, but I mean, you also see that this was a game that wasn't in Falcom's hands. This was, a little bit different. So
yeah, it was completely re-engineered and redone by Unix. So
yeah, so
they kind of had a little bit more control of how they wanted to manage it.
Yeah, so you can kind of see them put their influences into it. And I thought that first track, BGM 13, was especially good.
Wasn't that rad?
Yeah,
Man.
it's the type of music that I like to just put on when I'm kind of stressed out and close my eyes and just sit there and just listen to the music.
And they have like the little flourishes of like violins, playing. It's really, really rad. And then when it goes into that really kind of slow melodic part, and it's almost like you're flying across a meadow or something. It's so different. And then like the bass guitar will just go bow and just like pop in, and then it'll kick back up. It's like, I don't know. It was a really cool track, and something I discovered recently.
Yeah.
I'd never heard it before, so it was a good one to throw in there.
Yeah, and the second track too, I thought was a really good, had really nice energy to it. The flute or clarinet or whatever it was really cool. I really liked that, and it was just, like you said, it kind of redeemed itself. I don't want to sound like I was really hating on the PC Engine CD, and these two tracks just made it a lot easier to just be really excited about the rest of the soundtrack.
Yeah, so I think that about wraps up the show today. So today we covered Popful Mail on the Super Famicom, the Sega CD, PC Engine CD, and the PC88 and 98. And we listened to a bunch of new music, so it was a good time.
Yeah, new for us and hopefully new for some of you guys. So if you want to know more about the show, you can check us out online at pixelatedaudio.com for show notes and track lists. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Pixelated Audio.
Yeah, and feel free to leave some comments or feedback on the site and this episode. If you like music from Popful Mail, if you have really good memories of it, let me know, let James know, because, as far as I know, people hated this game. People love this. I don't know, let us know what your thoughts are, and especially about the music. Like, what version did you like?
Yeah, and what version did you play? Do you have any memories of this? Is this completely new to you? Like, we just love to hear from you listeners and just see what you think.
You've been posting some art articles on the website, which have been awesome reads, very good look at different box arts, and looking forward to more of those. So you guys definitely check those out on the website as well.
Yeah, thanks. I like I've mentioned before on the show that I'm an artist by trade, so I kind of wanted to get some art mixed into the podcast on our website. So I think that would be kind of neat.
Yeah, they kind of complement some of the episodes that we've done. So like the Power Quest one that you just released was a really cool article on the box art of Power Quest, and looking forward to what you got next. I'm also doing a kind of a spin-off show, not really related to Pixelated Audio, but it's called the Impulse Project. And if you like music from the demo scene and the tracking community and other, key gens and stuff like that, you can listen to that show. It's impulseproject.info. James is going to be on, hopefully, the next episode.
Yeah.
Been trying to get you on for a little while. But
yeah, it's just been chaotic with all the holidays and everything. Yeah,
so definitely check that out and listen to some great, chiptune stuff from the late 80s, early 90s, and even recent stuff as well. If you want to check more of our show out, we got a whole bunch of episodes in the lineup or in the mix.
Yeah, so you can definitely check out some of our past episodes, like Power Quest, like you mentioned. We had an episode on Battle Squadron, and
that was so good.
Yeah,
Ron Claren is such an amazing artist.
Yeah, there's some really good music in that episode, and then Grim Fandango, which we had the composer Peter McConnell on with us. So
that was a lot of fun.
Those would be some cool episodes to check out that aren't too old. So let us know what you think about those as well.
So the track taking us out is actually one that you picked, James. I was asking, I was like, which version do you want to go out with? We were thinking about ending on the ending theme, which was, vocalized, which we don't play a lot of vocal tracks.
Yeah.
But I asked you, I said, do you want to play the Japanese version or the North American version.
Yeah.
And you listen to both, and you're like, I think the Japanese version.
Yeah, there's some parts I think that I liked about both of them. I think the Japanese version was a song I actually liked a little more.
Yeah.
Probably because I couldn't tell what was being said.
It's a little bit more mellow, a little romantic. You kind of give me the love eyes right now.
Yeah.
It's a track by Shoko Minami, and it's arranged by Nobuhiko Kashiwara, and the track is called Somebody Loves You, and it's for Popful Mail on the Sega CD. Thank you guys so much for listening, and check us out in a few weeks for our new episode.
I managed to get his head. It has to be worth something.